Because a lot of people, what kind of deters them is that they have obstacles because of, how they've navigated their life.
The diet and the supplements and the testing is the easiest part.
It's like, okay, now when you have to retire or maybe you get injured and you don't have the choice to make that luxurious decision, now you have to kind of reinvent yourself and your whole kind of identity is challenged.
That was a really big moment for me because I realized, I'm like, shit, that's like a death of my old life, and now I've got this new life that I have to live, but that's gone forever.
All right, boom, we're on. Marko Papuchkovsky. Did I get the surname right, bro?
You got it right, bro.
Right on, right on.
That was really good.
So just for quick intro, so you are a health practitioner, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt. You're the founder of Humanly Wellness, which is an online functional health clinic working with mainly autoimmune diseases, gut hormone issues.
Martial arts, health, and business really are the three things that I feel somewhat qualified to speak about. So,
right on. Great, all great topics.
Yeah, exactly. We can talk, and they all relate to each other, like it's, there are some principles that apply to, like, with all of them, and I think, like, especially health, I think I'm coming around full circle. Like I used to be very, very alternative and think like this is the only way. And then after working with patients for 5-6 years, I've realized like why doctors do the things they do. Why medication exists, because not everybody wants to change.
Yeah, that's definitely something I actually wanted to touch on you with a little bit later on. But yeah, first, if we could just kind of get some background on you, a little understanding, kind of go back to the start, where you grew up, where it all began.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking about this to my friend over dinner last night. So he's getting married this year, and he's Macedonian, born in Australia, but he's marrying an Australian girl who grew up in Australia, kind of a wealthy area with a wealthy family. And last year they went to Macedonia together, and like she went to Macedonia, she went to Albania, like crossing the border, and experienced a whole different side of the world that you just don't see in the West. Like you just people don't understand how the world operates outside of where they come from. And like, I wish I could share photos, but we grew up, like I grew up in, if I could paint a picture, like think Eastern Europe, think Russia, think like gray communist buildings and kids on the street playing soccer and basketball and whatever. And like we grew up at the time, like I didn't know, but looking back, we were poor. My parents had me very young. My mum was 21. My dad was like 25. We lived in a little house. It's called a baraka. It's a Turkish word originally, and it's not a house. It's tiny. It's like a flat roof, and like the kitchen, we barely had a kitchen. The bathroom, I remember we used to have like having nightmares about going into the bathroom because it was so bad. But dude, like I loved my childhood. Grew up on the street. Grew up hanging around with the kids. There was like gypsy kids living in like metal sheet houses. There was like my friends. There was my neighbors. We used to play soccer. I started karate like really young at 5 years old. And, buying ice cream, like somebody getting you an ice cream once a month or once every other week was like the highlight of your week. You used to have to be a really good kid and behave really well and do something for someone, and they would buy you an ice cream. Like that was my childhood, and like I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think it like equipped me with some perspective and skills that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah. Perspective is a big one, right? Like, especially now, I mean, I can speak for myself as well, but I think you would probably agree that living in a Western country, the perspective you have from growing up somewhere like that is just night and day. And a lot of people who grow up in Western countries just don't have that same perspective. And it translates well into a kind of more cushy, luxurious first world life, as we could say.
Yeah. It gives you like... every immigrant that I've met, like I remember I met this lady when I was living in Canada. She was Bosnian, and she had left Bosnia during the war. And then we were talking about living in Montreal in Canada, and she said she's so easy here. She's like, it's easy. Like I can crush it here. It's easy. She's like, these people don't understand. And it's true. Like a lot of immigrants you find that have that entrepreneurial mentality because they see opportunity. I know it sounds cliche, but like they come to a new country and they're like, man, this is easy.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean I can just open up a business and register it for $100 and just start trading?
Yeah, no
that's
bribes.
crazy. No bribes, no
Don't
long
have to.
process. Like, you don't have to, like, it doesn't take years or months to do it. You don't have to go through a court system. You can just do it online. You know, in
Yeah,
Macedonia, getting your passport renewed, it takes weeks. And like, you've got to go to the place and blah, blah, blah. There's all these things you have to jump through, and there's people smoking cigarettes at you and they don't really give a fuck who you are.
yeah.
Whereas in countries like Canada and the US and Australia, you can just register a business and start trading. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
You don't have to jump through all those hoops. That's a huge thing because, in the Western countries, we can always complain and say, oh, government's like this, it's like that. But compared to these type of places, just the organization, like you're saying, how much easier things are. It's night and day. Like something as simple as, renewing your passport. You
Yeah.
spend half a day here, half a day there just to figure out what you have to do next. You have to talk to this person. You're getting the runaround. So, yeah, we definitely
Yeah.
have some good luxuries in that sense. What was family life like, would you say?
Family was really good, man. Like, I have really loving parents. My mum is like the most loving person you could possibly meet. Like, she'll do anything for you, which is good, but also for a man, maybe not so good. And so my dad, he's a smart man. Like, he balanced that out. So like, I was thinking about this conversation. I was like, my mum like gave me all the love I could possibly want, and then my dad prepared me for the world. He made it
That's a good
difficult.
balance.
Yeah, he made it difficult for me, which was what I needed. Um, they, as with all parents, like they could all do something better, but I think ultimately, like if a parent is better than their parent, they've done a good job. Like
Yeah,
they've moved the process forward. So yeah,
100%.
man, I really love my childhood. I had great grandparents. Like my granddad to this day is like my hero. I think he's one of the greatest men I've ever met. Cousins, aunties, uncles. It was good.
So you were in Macedonia to what age?
9 years old.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you're still pretty young, but um,
yeah,
so you were in school and then you came over to Australia after that. What was
yeah.
that like? Kind of immigrating process, transition.
Oh man, like it was crazy. Like living in Macedonia, everything was going really smooth. Like even if you look at my report cards from school, like I was like a straight A kid. Like everything was going really smooth, and then we moved to Australia, and like all of that was disrupted.
Mm,
So having to learn a different language, having to find new friends, having to adjust to a society that I don't understand. I went from like playing on the street to being locked in an apartment, and
yeah.
like that disrupted things for me. And like I fell behind in school because I had to learn a new language. And then eventually like I found my way. I was a bit of a like during high school, a bit of a loner kid. I didn't really go out much. I just trained, and I was always like ambitious, and I always wanted to do something. I didn't know what, but like I just trained and went to the gym and went to Jiu Jitsu and went to school. Like that was my life. Yeah.
Which is good. So you were kind of dialed in from pretty young. You didn't kind of go mess around with too much BS. You were just focused on the
No.
points because a lot of people, what kind of deters them is that they have obstacles because of, how they've navigated their life. So, if you
Yeah.
can keep all obstacles off like it sounded you did, it just makes it easier, right?
Yeah, like a lot of credit to my dad. Like he put me like he even from a young age he used to tell me like don't drink alcohol. Like don't it's shit. It's why would you want to drink? Why would you want to be drunk? Like things like this. So I've never been I mean I've been maybe tipsy, but I've never been like drunk ever in my life. Or he would always encourage me to do sport. And like if you're gonna be an athlete, you've got to be an athlete. You have to live an athlete lifestyle. Like I remember being like 12, 13, and before I went to bed, he would make me do push-ups, sit-ups, like in the living room. And he was like, this is just like brushing your teeth. You just have to get used to doing it every day. And that was like, he would push me to do those things. And so a lot of credit to him because when I grew, I just used to, even from a young age, I was like, I don't want to be skipping school and smoking weed and drinking because it's just dumb. It's not going to get me anywhere. Well, I was a kid. I didn't know any better, but he was wise enough to like guide me in the right direction.
Yeah. One
Yeah.
thing that I kind of popped in my head for me when you were talking about the Macedonian childhood, it's a little bit like kind of the rough, like you said, it's kind of growing up on the street, basically playing soccer. You got to scrape your knee and all that. something that I've experienced that I'd be curious what you think is like at some point, especially like, you know, in your early teens maybe or whenever it was, did you notice kind of difference between yourself and, for example, other kids who just grew up in Australia in terms of like how you are because of your environment that you grew up in and your lifestyle, kind of a toughness, a resilience that maybe others didn't have?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it toughness. There was definitely kids that were tougher than me. Like, I think what it taught me was like street smarts. So in psychology, they say, you know, you need to socialize a kid by the age of 5. So those really early formative years are very, very important. And by socialize, it's like, yeah, you can spend time with your parents, but what about other children? And how do you, like, do other children want to play with you? Do you fit in with the other kids? What do the neighbors think of you? And in Macedonia, like, you're walking around the neighborhood with other kids and you have to learn how to socialize with people. So you've got to be good with the neighbors and other adults. And you're like 5 years old, but you're like, dude, I remember we would throw like fake weddings as kids. And so we would all get dressed and get drums and things. And like, we'd walk down the street and do a fake wedding, a pretend wedding, and hustle the neighbors for money. Like, they would give us tips. And then you'd go and buy ice cream with that. And you're like 5, 6 years old doing this stuff. And so that taught me like not so much a toughness, but just a street smart, just being aware of like people and socially being able to sit. Like, I remember my first job, I was like 24 years old, sitting with like the leading doctors and practitioners in the country and just having dinner and talking to them. And I felt fine doing that. So it taught me like social aptitude, I think. It didn't really teach me how to be tough, but definitely taught me how to read the room, how to be able to talk to people, how to behave in an environment. And yeah, that's really what it taught me. But toughness is a whole different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's all super valuable for sure as well. So you said you got into martial arts, you started with karate around the age of 5.
Yeah.
What was the martial arts journey kind of like?
Yeah, so I started with karate in Macedonia. And I don't remember like too much about it. I just remember the instructor like picking us all up. He was like a big man. He was like 6'4" or something like that. And he was driving this old car, manual car, and he would pick up all the kids and we could like barely fit in the car, and he would drive us to training and then bring us home. And then we moved to Australia, and the only other thing I could find at my school was Taekwondo. And so I started Taekwondo, and the instructor, he was an Egyptian guy. His name was Habib Francis, and he's a great man. Like, he noticed I didn't speak English. My parents didn't have much money. And like a month into training, he was like, hey, like, you don't need to pay any fees. Like, you can just come train for free. I was like, shit, okay, like, that's really nice. And he would let me train for free. And then I would help him pack things up and he would take me home. So my parents were out working and he would drive me home every day. And that happened for like an 8 to 10 year period, you know, and like that gave me, like, if he had never done that, he wouldn't have given me an opportunity to continue martial arts, you know? And then I started Jiu Jitsu around 15 because I wanted to fight in MMA. And the same thing happened. Like, I trained for a little while and then my instructor was like, hey, you know, you can just come train for free. Because I always helped. Like, I always wanted to clean the gym or help out. And like, that's the thing. Like, a lot of guys now come into the Jiu Jitsu gym and they don't realize, like, if you are an asset to the gym, like, if you can help, you'll get like the red carpet rolled out for you. Like, if you have a good attitude, people want you there. And so the same thing happened to me when I went to TriStar in Canada. Like, within a couple of months, I was there every day. I was a good training partner. I was helping people prep, and like, you know, I was treated like I've been there my entire life. So martial arts, like, it's cool, man, because it teaches you proper behavior and like knowing what room you're in and knowing how to behave in that room and not be entitled, not be a dick, you know. Yeah. It's really cool. So if it wasn't for martial arts, I don't think I would have had the opportunities that I've had, for sure.
That's definitely something I was going to ask you as well. Something I was curious about that I don't think we've talked about before is, do you play chess?
I do, yeah.
Right on, because
yeah.
I kind of thought of this recently, that Jiu Jitsu is kind of like physical chess, right? And then chess is obviously the game chess. And then the third one that, in my opinion, is kind of like the trifecta is sales. because I feel like sales is kind of like a conversational chess as well. So it's like those three are all kind of similar categories, and a lot of people end up kind of practicing all three of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, jiu-jitsu is crazy, man. It's like the perfect blend of physical and mental.
Mm.
Like you could be physically really strong and really fit, but if you're not mentally sharp and if you don't know the techniques and the moves and the sequences, like you're just going to lose. And the thing with jiu-jitsu that's cool is like there's no puncher's chance. You don't lose by luck. Somewhere you made a mistake. And
Yeah.
it's the same with chess. Like you don't lose by luck. Somewhere you made a mistake. Whereas like kickboxing and boxing, like you could be a lot more skilled than somebody, but if they're bigger than you and if they just happen to connect, well then, you know,
Yeah. You
you
always have a
lose.
risk of maybe you slip or something
Yeah,
crazy happens, freak accident. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Have you tried jiu-jitsu?
I did when I was much younger. I dabbled in various martial arts. I tried jiu-jitsu, Krav Maga, karate, kung fu. The one I did for the longest was kung fu.
Yeah,
But I was, yeah, that's one thing I have to kind of give credit to my mother for, actually, for kind of, it's interesting because all the things that I've kind of learned throughout my life that I'm like, wow, this is how you'd want to raise a kid, like properly make them into, a solid human. I kind of actually had those things from my mother. So, I was put in things like chess, French, Spanish, soccer, skateboarding, jiu-jitsu, various
yeah,
martial
wow.
arts, cooking, even more. But that's just off the top of my head. So I was like, I think you like PBD a lot, right?
I do like Patrick, yeah.
So I
Yeah,
was just hearing something recently of someone saying that they were at his house with him. They had dinner with him and his family, and they were just taken back and so impressed by how his kids were, how his kind of family structure and everything was. And it seems like that's kind of a similar thing he's kind of installing with his kids. So again, I heard him
yeah,
mention on a podcast, he was like, "Oh, my kids were asking me, like, oh, are all kids' schedules like this after school? He has jiu-jitsu, then he has baseball, then he has soccer, then he comes home, then he has swimming, or whatever it is." So it's a interesting way, but instilling that discipline and ultimately being well-rounded, I think is critical, especially
yeah,
for men.
for sure. And look, I don't have kids yet, so I don't know, like I'm not a parent yet, but I think if you give kids a lot of idle time, they'll fill it with things that maybe aren't good for them because they don't know any
Mm,
better. You know, like
yeah,
they'll start playing video games or sit on TikTok or play on their iPad and they fill it with this like empty time with just things that feel good to them. But what feels good to you isn't always good for you.
yeah,
It's so I think that was George, no? George Janko was talking about spending time with
yeah. I
Patrick.
think
Yeah,
so.
I've heard
Yeah,
that one. Yeah, man, he's a cool dude. I really like Patrick. I like their show. I
yeah.
like I like George a lot as well. Yeah.
Have you read any of Patrick's books?
No, no.
Really? I just started reading Your Next Five Moves.
Yeah,
I'm just started, so I'm only like 30 pages in, but I like it a lot.
yeah,
And it was
nice.
interesting because reading it, and then I was just watching a bit of his podcast with George Janko, and he was touching on some of the topics from the book and kind of his life experiences, and it was like so on point and directly, like he took his saying straight out of the book. So
Yeah,
it was interesting to see that kind of translation.
yeah,
But kind of going back to jiu-jitsu, the community element of it seems to be huge too as well, right?
yeah,
Kind of like a camaraderie, brotherhood, community. Because which, like what you said, the kids nowadays, they have these outlets like social media, TikTok, and all this stuff. But um, the older generations, our generations, when we were younger, we didn't have that stuff. So your idle time was, maybe like I remember for me, I'd go to my neighbor's house, my friends, and I'd stand outside their house and I'd like wait for them and I'd like yell like, "Come on, let's play," or go knock on their door. So it was still like, somewhat active and, not a negative way to kind of spend your time. But nowadays, yeah, kids have all these kind of bad habits they can just fall straight into.
yeah, man. Nowadays, like the parks are empty, the neighborhoods are empty, the basketball courts are empty. Like there's no kids. They're all
Yeah.
playing video games or they're in, they're inside, which I think, yeah, like in jiu-jitsu, we do have kids classes and the kids that come, they're you know, I think they benefit a lot. But jiu-jitsu is weird, man. Like, it attracts people from all different backgrounds. Like, we've got guys there that are black belts that are, like, one guy's a pharmacist, another one is a professor of theology, another one is a actuary, finance, like, you doctors, like, you just have a broad spectrum of people that love the sport. And it's a great community. You learn a lot. You network. Like, my best connections are built through jiu-jitsu, even for like business and health. Like, it's all from jiu-jitsu gyms. Like, everywhere you travel as well. Like, I've been to places like Iceland and Sweden and Canada, and like wherever you go, if you do jiu-jitsu and you find a local jiu-jitsu gym, you find friends. Like, they take care of you. They want to train with you. They'll take you out to dinner. They'll invite you to their house. Like, it's a very cool community to have. And there's something about, like, I think there was a study or something that I read a little while ago about like going through difficult times with people. And when you go through especially for men, like if you go through a traumatic experience with other men, you build a stronger bond, which makes sense because like soldiers have really strong bonds. Jiu-jitsu, like if you're struggling every day on the mat and you're having like a difficult time and maybe you compete and you lose, or maybe you compete and you win, you experience highs and lows with the same people over and over again, you build a really, really strong bond. Like, I'm getting married this year and my jiu-jitsu coach is my godfather and my other jiu-jitsu buddy is my best man, because like, who else am I going to...
That's awesome.
Like, I've struggled. They've seen me like at my lowest and they've seen me at my best, you know? So that's kind of, you end up building a really strong bond with the guys you train with.
Yeah, I was actually just reading something I think it was on Twitter, but someone was saying like, oh, where do you meet friends or, like like-minded people as an adult or over the age of 35 or whatever it is? And someone responded like jiu-jitsu gyms. So it's like those places where community is facilitated, camaraderie, and then also people with like-minded shared values. Like, if you're in jiu-jitsu, you're going to meet people like jiu-jitsu. If you're in the gym, those type of places are really the best place to meet people and form all types of relationships. Like you said, even the business relationships, whatever it might be, they all come from there. And they're obviously going to be, stronger, even if it's like a business relationship, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just kind of a random encounter, how it might be social media these days.
Well, the thing with jiu-jitsu, like or any combat sport or any sport, but any combat sport particularly, like your character gets revealed. So if you walk into the gym arrogant with a bad attitude, you usually will either change or you'll leave, and then like people experience your character. And so it's very easy for them to trust you to do business with you because like, well, I've known this guy for 15 years. I've seen how he behaves in the gym. I've seen how he behaves at difficult times, good times, bad times. So business is like the trust is already there. And that's the most difficult thing with business, man. Like the most difficult thing with sales and business is building trust with somebody. That's the key. Everything else is easier.
Opens all the doors.
Yeah, if someone doesn't trust you or you don't trust them, it's going to be a difficult relationship.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The thing is, like you were saying, the ego seems to be a big part of it too, right? Like kind of getting humbled. Because a lot of people, even if they, are full of themselves or whatever it is, they might not have an experience where they're kind of humble and they might end up going through a good part of their life, staying that way. But martial arts will kind of humble them, have a chance to check their ego, and ultimately kind of come a little bit more down to earth.
Yeah, man, especially competing. Like, especially if you do something like MMA where, like, I was young and arrogant and, like, I was on like a win streak in my fights, and I was like, man, I'm the man. And then I got knocked out in front of like all my friends and family, in front of everybody, and that humbles you. You go, shit, like I'm human, 100%. and maybe I didn't prepare for this properly, or maybe I didn't, so it does. Yeah, I think sports overall, like any sport, is amazing for children. Like a competitive sport, whether it's like gymnastics or swimming or soccer or martial arts, whatever it is, like I think it's when I have kids, I'm going to make them do sport, like a lot of it. They're not going to have a choice until they're at least 18. And then after that, they can decide for themselves. But I think it's key.
Super important. You mentioned your kind of fighting career. Can we touch on that a little bit? Kind of how did you transition from like jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, schooling to like, what was your transition out of high school like, and then getting into competing?
I always, like, since the age of 16, I wanted to fight professionally. I was like, I'm going to make a run for MMA. From the age of like 16 to 25, my life was pretty much just wanting to fight. So everything else I did was just to support that dream. So I worked jobs and whatever, but I didn't take my career seriously because I wanted to fight. I had quite a few amateur fights, like over a dozen. I had many, many jiu-jitsu tournaments. Overall, pretty successful, but I realized at some point that I was like, I don't think I want to do this. I think it was around the age of like 25, 26. I had moved to Canada. I wanted to just train full-time. I was living in the TriStar dorms and living with guys that are in the UFC, training like with George St. Pierre, Rory McDonald. A lot of the guys like around us were already in the roster. And I was like, man, these guys are professional fighters, top 10 in the UFC, but they don't live very good lives. Like, they don't have relationships, they don't have children, they don't have money, they're struggling and they're constantly injured. And like, when you see the reality of the sport, it's actually very stressful and very difficult. And I realized, I remember even my coach saying to me, he was like, man, like you're a good talent, you've got good skills, you could really make it in the UFC. It's just too bad that you're also smart. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you'll probably find an easier way to get what you want to get in life. Like and so for me, like that was business. I realized if I have this competitive spirit, I can apply it to business and live a much more balanced life. Like I can have a family and I can have children and I can do something that's outside of always thinking about me, because fighting is a very selfish pursuit. Like it's all, you're always thinking about your next fight. It's very stressful and you're like, well, I have to train twice a day. I've got to eat. I can't go out. I don't want to do like whatever. It's just a very difficult way to live life, man. It's very, very difficult.
Consuming, right?
It's consuming, yeah. And it doesn't give you much opportunity to like make a difference to people outside of you, because it's selfish. It's all about you.
Yeah, that's the thing with the kind of professional sporting competing career. It's like for a lot of people, like you said, especially if you're smart or you have other interests, whatever it might be, you're leaving a lot of chance. Injury can deter your career, and it's like a kind of single focus way of living life. So it kind of takes away your opportunity to be well-rounded in a sense, because your youth is going to be heavily committed and consumed by that, and then once you get to a certain point, you're going to have to kind of either try to linger on in that career or just make a huge shift. So like a lot of people seem to also have kind of trouble, because it's like it becomes a part of their identity at that point, right? You've been doing it all your life. It's what you spend most of your time doing, thinking about, like you were just saying.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now when you have to retire or figure out a new career, or, maybe you get injured and you don't have the choice to make that luxurious decision, now you have to kind of reinvent yourself and your whole kind of identity is challenged.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because like you've earned this authority and respect, but in a very small, unimportant part of the world. So like to other people, so say you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, every time you walk into your jiu-jitsu gym, you get respect, you feel good, you have authority, but then outside of the jiu-jitsu gym, you're just a normal person. Yeah. So if you go work at a job, you're just another guy at the job. You're not a black belt to them. So it's a bit of a shock, because you're like, shit, like I have to rebuild myself outside of this. And there's a little bit of ego involved for sure, because not everyone cares that you're a jiu-jitsu black belt.
Did you kind of go through that experience a little bit when you kind of transitioned out of fighting, or no?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of fighters do. Or like most fighters that have left fighting, experience that. They go, it's kind of like, I heard Thierry Henry talking about it on a podcast. He was saying when you retire as an athlete, it's kind of like a death of an identity, right? Yeah. You're no longer that. Exactly. You're something else now. And I feel like a lot of athletes have to find something to channel their energy into, something competitive, because they're competitive. Yeah. Like all athletes ultimately are extremely competitive. So whether I think business is good because you can compete against yourself and other people, but mostly against yourself. But if you were to, I think living a normal life, like a regular 9 to 5, would be very difficult for people who are athletes, because the mindset is just different. Yeah,
I had a similar experience. So I was pursuing soccer And my goal was to play professionally, and then had various injuries, and then it was starting to, seem like it wouldn't make as much sense. And then I stopped playing competitively and just played for fun, had more injuries, and then I was like, all right, this probably just wrap it up for now. And I definitely experienced exactly what we just touched on.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is difficult. You have to find something to channel yourself into, something that's kind of be consuming in that same sense, right? That you can kind of put your all into, make it kind of like your purpose, right? Because a lot of athletics, it's like purpose, identity kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were saying 25 you were fighting. That was all kind of amateur fights while you were still in Australia?
Yeah, all amateur fights in Australia. Yeah.
And then you went and moved to Canada for a while, trained at TriStar.
Yeah.
When did that happen? How was that?
I think I went there once for like a 2-month trip when I was 23. I came back to Australia, and like 6 months after coming back, I'm like, man, I need to move there. Like I have to move. So I quit my job, sold everything I had, and I just moved to Canada, bought a one-way ticket. I had no place to stay. I was like, I've ended up finding a room through some friends, and I just moved, and I ended up staying there for almost 2 years and just trained, started my business there, met a lot of people. Like that really taught me a lot, I think like men need to go on an adventure. I think like young men need to experience like some type of adventure where like you take them, you put them somewhere, and they just have to figure it out. And that was that. Like,
yeah,
I didn't speak French. I didn't know anything about the city. I just kind of moved and just made it work. I don't know. I figured it out.
That kind of unknown factor is kind of exciting, right?
Yeah. And like, that's where it all started. That's even where the business started, So looking back, like if I hadn't done that, I don't know what I would be doing now.
The domino effect.
Yeah.
So how was that transition to living there in the new place and then training? At that point when you moved there, were you still pursuing fighting competitively, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of transition happened while you were there.
It was in that, yeah, exactly. It was in that time. I remember like I was training all the time, and then I met this dude in the gym. His name's Awan. And shout out to him if he listens to this. But he is a entrepreneur. Him and his brother, I think, own a company called Phenomena. It was called at the time. And it was like a virtual reality gaming thing. And he would, we would train at the gym, and then he'd be like, hey man, like tell me about your nutrition. Because I was always talking about nutrition and blah, blah, blah. And he would really push me to do something entrepreneurial. And I remember he got me to work at his office. So he used to work in Concordia University. He had like a business accelerator called District 3. And he was like, come to District 3. It's in Concordia. It's downtown. Just come work with us. And so I like sat down in the office, and I'm like trying to build online things and build a calendar and like put up posts about nutrition. And he would always push me and encourage me. And man, he was one of the main reasons like why I do what I do. Like he was always very optimistic. You need to do this, you need to do that. And like very entrepreneurial minded. Like a lot of entrepreneurs are dreamers and they're optimists, right? They don't think about, what could go wrong. They think about what could go right. And he really pushed me, and I built the business. And then I realized, I was like, actually, I really like this lifestyle. I'd much rather do this than I felt more challenged. I felt more like intellectually challenged, and I was having to, I think for me, feeling challenged is important. If I don't feel challenged, I get kind of bored. So it was something new that I had to get good at. And that was it. And then I just decided, I'm like, you know what? I want to run a business. Like, I don't want to fight professionally. I don't find it interesting anymore. And also, like, there was a point in my life where I'm like, I don't really want to hurt people. Because, like, fighting's different. Yeah. You can compete in soccer and it's competitive. But in fighting, you've got to hurt someone. Like, if you're on, or they have to hurt you. So it's like, if you're winning the fight and you're on top of the guy, and now you're like, how many times do you want to elbow him in the face?
Yeah.
How much damage do you want to inflict?
Especially when you've been the one on the receiving end of it, you know what it feels like. So now you know what you're kind of putting the other person through as well.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's like, I don't have anything against this guy. He's just like me. Like, he wants the same thing I do, but now we have to really inflict damage on each other. It's not nice, man. Like, it's you have to have that thing in you to want to do that, and not everyone does. Or sometimes you mature out of it, you grow out of it. when you're younger, like when I was younger, I was angry. I like wanted to prove something, but then eventually I was like, I don't really care anymore. I don't want to fight and prove anything to anyone. I don't want to hurt people, and I don't want to get hurt either. Like Khabib talks about it, I think, when he fought, was it Justin Gaethje? And he was on top of the guy, and he's like, I can keep hitting him, but his parents are in the room, so I'm going to submit him instead. You know, because it's like, it's just not.
Because he knew he was so tough.
It's not
he
nice.
was not gonna. Yeah.
So
I think he said he was gonna. He wanted to do a rear naked choke because he knew if he did an arm bar, he wouldn't tap.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to like break his arm in front of his family or something.
Yeah.
So he just put him to sleep. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was the journey. Alan was a big help in that time to help me transition, and like he showed me a different world, you know. And then I met some guys, and then I ended up working at WeWork at the time in Montreal, co-working space. And then like it was so cool, dude. And I still talk to a lot of the guys. Like we're still really, really good friends. There was like young guys running e-com companies. There was copywriters. There were all types of people, and I was like, this is cool. Like this is a great lifestyle. I can go to WeWork and like hang out with friends and work and make money, and it's great. So that's what I did. And then I moved back to Australia and really like put my head down and just worked for the next 4 or 5 years, worked throughout the pandemic, and just built the business as much as I could.
So yeah, I want to come back to the business stuff, but you had some of your own health issues, right? Kind of throughout this time. What was that like? What was kind of your health journey like? Did that happen before you started the business or during? What was that timeline like?
Yeah, so I started to develop psoriasis when I was a teenager, like at the age of like 13 or 14. But prior to that, even as a young kid, I was like sick quite a lot. So in Macedonia, like doctors would just give you antibiotics and, you know, very traditional type of care. And I had a lot of ear infections. I had my tonsils removed. I used to get tonsillitis a lot. And then later in life, I developed psoriasis. And I remember being 18, going to a dermatologist and being like, oh, I've got psoriasis. Like, what do I do about it? And they just gave me like antibiotics and a cream. It was like a 8-minute appointment, and I paid $300 or something like that. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like, surely there's a different way. And then I started to get staph infections. So I'm fighting and I'm cutting weight and I'm getting ready for fights. But at the same time, I keep getting staph infections. Like every 2 months, I've got staph on my neck, on my arms, on whatever. So I was constantly taking antibiotics, and that really affected my gut. And then I developed chronic diarrhea. And I'm talking like, dude, 10 to 12 times a day. I'd eat and I couldn't even finish a meal because my gut was such a mess. And at the time as well, like my mum, when I was 21, 22, had gone through breast cancer. And I remember taking her to an integrative doctor and seeing what they do. And he kind of opened my eyes, and I went, oh, this is interesting. Like, this is different. And so all of those things put together, I ended up doing microbiome testing, DNA testing. This is back in like 2017 for myself, and found out I have celiac genes. So I cut out gluten from my diet, and since my psoriasis completely went away, like disappeared, I found out that I had infections in my gut. So I had a candida overgrowth, plus I had salmonella actually, and all of this bacteria is causing dysbiosis and diarrhea. So I actually did like an antimicrobial protocol for 12 weeks, and that went away. So my gut improved, and I was like, shit, like this works, and I can change my own health. And so why can't we do it for other people? And then we just started really like one client, servicing them online, sending them remote testing. And then it just grew from there. And then we created a structure and a program. So people come to us with a unique condition, and then we select the type of testing that we need, whether it's DNA panels or microbiome or hormone or whatever it is. And we send it to them remotely, we get the results, and then we build protocols for them. And like, I've got 2 appointments yesterday with patients who had chronic issues with their gut. These guys like run their own business. They're very busy, but chronic issues with their gut. And one of them, I said, like, how are your bowel movements now? He goes, dude, it's great. I didn't think it would work so fast. You know, we've got guys coming off of, or women as well, coming off of methotrexate, autoimmune drugs, like really serious drug therapies, just because they've decided to change something about their life. So it works.
Yeah.
And it's becoming really popular now. There's more and more people talking about DNA testing and microbiome and things like this, but we were doing it back in like 2018. So that's kind of the health journey. I was just really passionate about it. I was like, I still am, but at the time, like a lot more. I felt that anger that I had in fighting, I kind of put into this. I'm like, man, people have issues. I had issues and I was being mistreated. I kept going to doctors and no one would actually ask me about my diet or ask me about my lifestyle. They just wanted to give me antibiotics and creams, and it's bullshit because I never felt better. So I had a lot of like fire and anger and put that towards wanting to help people. So my earlier content, like when I was younger and starting the business, was a lot more controversial. And I've realized like the more I mature and the more I know, I realize that there's a reason why doctors operate that way, and there's a balance, and you have to kind of find the balance. But unfortunately, controversial content gets attention, and like balanced content often doesn't get attention. So yeah,
it doesn't strike that emotion, right? Yeah, it's interesting because especially when you've experienced it. So I'm guessing you were working with somewhat of like a functional medicine doctor yourself originally. It's like when you experience it and you see, you know, how functional medicine works, how, you know, direct the approach is, the root cause approach. It's just like, it just makes so much sense, right? And like why the name is functional medicine. It's like, this is literally functional.
Yeah.
It's technically just medicine, but conventional medicine is not really doing its job in most senses. So the functional medicine is the medicine that's actually functioning.
Yeah.
And like, well, with functional labs, it's like, okay, you have gut issues or you have digestion issues. Why are we not going to go look at your gut? Why are you going to just prescribe some Band-Aid solution? It's like, so when you realize that stuff, a lot of people who even, you know, might not have too much experience, it's so easy to lose face because you're like, okay, if I don't have a cold or I don't need, you know, surgery or antibiotics, your primary care, your GP can't really do much for you, right? They can refer you to another specialist who maybe has a couple more tools, or they're going to give you a prescription, X-ray. That's really about it.
Yeah, 99% of the time, it's just going to be a prescription, you know?
Yeah.
But that's because those are the tools that they have.
And that's what they've been trained to use, and their whole ideology is based off. Yeah, unfortunate. So, functional labs, something definitely interesting. So it was a big part for you in kind of figuring out your gut issues, but also you said the genetic testing as well.
Yeah,
functional labs is definitely something I wanted to talk about because it's like so many people are not even aware of them.
Yeah.
And that's super interesting. What do you think about kind of, well, another thing is the whole autoimmune situation seems to be exploding. There's kind of like an autoimmune epidemic.
Yeah.
Let's touch on that first, actually. What do you think is kind of the reasoning behind that?
I would say primarily diet. There's other things, like people will talk about stress, but let's be honest, life in the 1940s was a lot more stressful than life in 2024. So
yeah,
it's usually like it's a combination of things, but I would say diet is probably the primary one. So when you look at a standard Western diet, people don't even eat food anymore. People eat food-like products, you know? So you eat cereal, which isn't technically a food. It's a food-like product. It's edible. It's safe for you to eat. It's not going to kill you right away, but it's not actually a food. It's not nourishment. And it's the same, like a lot of people just eat, you know, ready-made meals. They don't cook their own food. They don't understand what food is anymore. Like that skill is gone, you know? So I think diet is the primary thing that's driving autoimmune disease, without a doubt. And I see it in our patients. They come in, we get a dietary recall, and I'm like, man, how do you eat that? Or like, how do you not feel? Yeah. And they feel horrible, actually. But I'm like, how do you not realize that it's because they're not taught anything about food. They don't even understand the basics of what is a calorie, what's a protein, what's a carbohydrate, like what's a fat. They have no idea, and they're in their 60s. I had a patient the other day. She's been feeling anxious. She's had health issues for years, and she just doesn't eat. She doesn't eat anything, dude. Like, we look at her dietary recall, and I go, "You're barely eating. You barely have 1,000 calories coming in. How do you think your brain's gonna function?"
Yeah,
you know, there's no other way that
people aren't even.
There's no other ways that us humans can get energy. The only way we can get energy to create energy is through food. There's no other way. And I know it
Yeah.
sounds cliche, but you are what you eat. And so if you're going to be eating food-like substances that aren't really foods, then your immune system is doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is to protect you. So he goes, well, I'm eating this thing. I don't really recognize what it is. I've got maybe a viral infection that I've picked up, or I've pesticide exposure or environmental mold or whatever it is. And so your immune system is hyperactive. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's your job to change the environment. Like, the human body doesn't want to be sick. The human body always wants to heal. You just have to provide the right environment. And that requires change. You know, like we've had patients with MS improve symptoms. We've had patients with rheumatoid arthritis manage their entire condition just through diet. So it is possible. It's not easy. You've got to make changes, but it's up to you. Like, being sick is not easy and being healthy is not easy. They're both difficult. You just have to pick which one you want.
Yeah, pick your heart.
Yeah.
Something that's interesting about the diet stuff that I've actually been noticing recently is it seems like it can affect kind of Western, like Americans, Australians more so than maybe, immigrants or people of, different ethnic backgrounds, because there isn't so much of like a tradition around their food.
Yeah.
Like, there isn't a cultural food. Because like when you can trace your diet back, hundreds of years, what your people, what your family, what your grandparents have been eating. Now, if you're eating something that's, obviously it's kind of somewhat of like a brainwashing process, right? It happens slowly over time. But, if you're comparing the stuff you're eating out of a plastic bag to, the lamb meat and the stew your grandparents were eating and what you've been used to eating your whole life, it's like, it's a little bit harder and you're going to maybe be a little more likely to think twice about it. But even then, it's like certain things, like, I can speak on Persian culture. It's like things like animal fats, that now it's in the kind of holistic health community are becoming really popular. That's completely normal. Eating organs, brains, eyes, tongues, this is all completely normal. But even now, the current generations are being kind of confused on that stuff and, being made to believe like the cholesterol, you have heart disease maybe genetically in your family, but it's the cholesterol, cut that out. So instead of using that animal fat or that butter that your parents and your grandparents have been using for a long time, here's a plant-based butter.
Yeah.
And some people, they don't even know the difference. They think they bought butter and it's plant-based, and it kind of slowly creeps up on you, right? So if you're not intentional, if you're not aware, if you're not making an effort, that's a lot of the time when people kind of slowly slip into poor diet, poor lifestyle. And for some people, it's just kind of how they've been set up from the beginning, which is even more unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, having a traditional cuisine definitely helps you understand food better. Like, I remember my grandparents cooking with like lard, animal fat.
Yeah.
We used to eat liver as children. Liver was one of my like favorite meals. All that stuff is just traditional cuisine in a lot of places. But in the West, we don't have a traditional cuisine. Traditional cuisine in the West is McDonald's and fast food.
Yeah.
And so nourishment to big corporations and big companies, they're not trying to make the food in the healthiest way possible. They're trying to make the food in the most profitable way possible without, and having it safe. So that, yes, you eat it and it won't make you instantly sick. For some people it will. If you're celiac or if you have issues, you'll feel it straight away. But it's not going to kill you. Like, one meal isn't going to do the damage. But if you do that over and over and over again, it has a really, really negative effect, man. I think from what I've seen, like anecdotal evidence, I think diet is driving most disease in modern society.
Would you say environmental toxins is a pretty fair factor in it as well?
Yeah, I would say so, but not to the extent that people make it out to be. We've definitely...
The diet is kind of like the non-environmental toxins, right? It's the toxins being fed directly.
You're literally putting it in your mouth. There are things like mold and there are things like pesticide exposure that can play a big role, but not to the extent that people want to make it out to be. I think if most people, as a fundamental starting point, if most people just started cooking their own food and preparing their own meals, their health will improve.
Knowing actually what they're
don't
eating.
worry about like how many calories or what am I cooking or should I do gluten-free. Just prepare your own meals. Just put love and nourishment into your meals and like think of how am I going to feed myself and what can I prepare for me and my family, and that alone will make a huge difference to your health. I was saying to one of the patients, I said, look, when you had your children and they were young and they were toddlers, did you feed them at the same time every day? And she was like, yes. I said, and did they have naps throughout the day? And she was like, yes. I said, what happened if you didn't feed them at the same time every day? If you skipped a meal, what would happen to that child? She's like, she would get cranky and she would start crying and she wouldn't feel good. I'm like, okay. And so what about you? You're an adult. What happens if you skip a meal? How do you think you're going to feel? Because if you're going to take care of a toddler and make sure that they get the right nourishment and make sure that they get the right, even, dude, people take care of their pets more than they take care of themselves. You know, they feed their dogs the same thing every single day. They make sure that it's like organic and not processed. And it's like, well, how about you? You're a human. What about you? Like, why do you skip meals? Why do you not take care of yourself? And then how do you expect to feel and think and operate if you just are not going to nourish yourself appropriately?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people can kind of get a little bit overwhelmed too in the beginning when they're like, oh, I have to make all these changes and do this. But kind of as you're touching on, the main step is really just to simplify in the beginning. Just make things simple, reduce, make fewer ingredients from, those long 30 ingredients lists. Just avoid those whole food ingredients, make your own food and just reduce it down. People are like thinking meals have to be some extravagant thing. It can just be 2-3 ingredients on a plate, simplified. And that's usually good first step, because another thing people think about is like they have to just hit some switch and be operating on this different level now. But it's like they kind of miss the fact that it's an incremental process, right? You're changing your lifestyle, you're changing your habits. So it's not like you're going to snap your fingers and you're just going to have all that in place. You're building systems, you're building routines. The first time you try cooking that home cooked meal, when you don't cook at all, it might be a little bit difficult. But you do that for a week, for 2 weeks, maybe make the same meal, then it's going to be much easier. Then you get in a flow like everything else. So,
yeah, absolutely. And like humans have this idea of they have to do everything at either 100% or nothing at all. And like the fact is you don't do anything at 100%. But even if you make a 20% change, it's better than doing nothing at all. So we get people that want to join our programs. And one of the objections we get is, oh, I'm just not ready yet. I'll do it in a week when I can really dedicate my time to it and blah, blah. It's like, there's never a perfect time. And your disease isn't going to wait until you're ready. It just keeps progressing.
Exactly. It's not the right time now, but there is
no right time. You just have to start and like action. You don't have to do it perfect. I'm not perfect. Every meal I eat is not perfect, but I make an effort and I'm mindful of it. And that's really health, man. Like health is just, before you get into like functional testing and microbiome and DNA and what supplements do I take, you've got to cover the basics. You have to sleep, eat, and move. And if you can't do that, and that's all free, by the way. You don't have to pay me or pay you to do that. You can do that for free. All you have to do is learn some information, which is easier than ever before, and put the effort and time into preparing your meals, going for a walk, and getting to bed on time.
Yeah, a lot of people get ahead of themselves in that sense. They're already thinking about those things. It's like solidify your foundation, because even if you are doing those, you're cooking some meals, whatever it is, but if you still have, a lot of error there, drastic error, then if you're doing the supplements and that stuff's you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, and you're actually wasting those efforts that are going in the right direction because you don't have that solid foundation. Something that just popped in my head when you said that, it was actually a quote I was just thinking about from Patrick Bet-David that applies to kind of the health space a lot, is that change occurs when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about that? And, as both of us have had health journeys, gone through it and kind of resolved our issues through our own experiences, because, if you're actually suffering, if you're uncomfortable, you're looking for any way out. You're looking for any solution. And some people have to look hard and wide to find it. And others, they just have someone stick a hand out to help them, right? Like me or you. It's like, I'm here for you. I have tools to help you. I can help guide you. And even then, they're not, ready to move forward. So what do you think it is because it's not everybody. And this is something, I've been kind of thinking about. Do you think it's as simple as it's just the pain of staying the same is not greater all the time? Or do you think there's kind of variation in people?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. I think I think everybody has different driving factors, and everybody has different standards of how they want to live their life. I've seen people who As soon as they have a mild discomfort, as soon as they start getting, say, constipation, they're like, I want this fixed. And then I've seen other people who have lived with it for 30, 40 years and never done anything about it. So humans are really interesting. That's the part of health that what you realize when you work with patients for a long time is that the diet and the supplements and the testing is the easiest part. The most difficult part is counseling them through making those changes and finding it's a lot of psychology and counseling, to be honest. And everybody's unique and everyone has different driving factors. Some people want to get better for their partner. Some people want to get better because they want to feel better. But almost always is an external driving force that makes them want to change. But that quote reminds me of a story that I remember hearing from someone. There was like, you know, a man's walking down the street and he can hear this dog howling, and the dog's howling and howling. And he walks up to the dog, and the dog's sitting at the front door of someone's house, and he's like barking and howling and crying. And he knocks on the door, and the owner comes out, and he says, "Hey, you know, your dog is, why is your dog making all this noise?" And he goes, "Oh, well, he's sitting on a nail." He goes, "Well, why doesn't he just move? Because, you know, it must not hurt enough." And it's the same thing. It's like, I've seen people who are wheelchair bound. I've seen people who, I remember one lady, we had a call and she was telling me that she had her daughter's wedding coming up and she had to wear an adult nappy because she was constantly like having, you know, urgent bowel movements wherever. She couldn't drive anywhere because she had to have diarrhea all the time. And I'm like, and she didn't do the program.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I just don't know. I don't know how. I'm not going to convince you. It's up to you. You can live your life that way. It's not up to me to tell you to change. We're here if you want the help. And if you don't, then that's fine. Like, I've stopped trying to convince people. When I was earlier in business, I would handle objections, right? Like in sales, objection handling time. Now I don't do that. Yeah. Oh, you know, I need to talk to my partner, or
just cut to the chase.
It's not the right time or whatever. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. You know, just understand there are consequences of that. Just understand that if nothing changes, nothing changes. If you don't do something about this, it's not going to get better on its own. And in fact, it's probably going to get much worse. And I don't want you as a patient if you're not ready to change, because now I've committed to working with you for 6 months and I have to drag you along like you're my child. And I'm not going to do that. Like, if you're not in it, don't start.
Yeah. So you can take the horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think standards, kind of people's standards for themselves, whether that comes from their upbringing, whether that comes from how they, you know, their vision for their own life, how they view themselves, whatever it might be, is definitely a factor. But it's interesting because you would think, you know, the horse is thirsty, you brought it to the water, why are you not going to drink it, right? But yeah, that's makes a big connection to the psychology aspect, like you were saying. It's like there has to be some, you know, deep-rooted identity things within people which makes these various decisions and commitments difficult for them.
And I've accepted I'm not a psychologist. So I don't know. And even psychologists don't know. You know, they spend an entire lifetime studying the topic, writing books, PhDs, blah, 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 and they can't even tell you exactly why somebody wants to change or not want to change. Like, you know, you can grow up in a household with an alcoholic dad and you could also be an alcoholic, or you could never drink again. Why? Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
No one can answer the question. So it's like trying to figure all that out. I've just removed. I stopped getting frustrated with people. I'm like, if you want to work with us, great. If you want to change, great. If you don't, that's fine. Find somebody else. You know, if you don't want to commit to something long term and you want something cheap and easy and a miracle cure, go ahead and find it. That's not what we do.
Yeah, I've heard some people kind of elaborate on the research of exercise, and they're just listing the benefits, and then they're like, this could be a pill. This is actually exercise. If this was a pill, people would be lining up to buy it, but you don't see a lot of people taking advantage of it. And something that I found interesting is actually you will hear a lot of practitioners talk about the benefit of exercise, but a large majority of them, even the ones talking
they don't do it.
They don't practice what they preach, so they don't exercise themselves.
Man, a lot of practitioners don't live the life. Like, I've seen overweight practitioners, I've seen people with their own health issues, and that's probably why they get into the space. It's not saying that every practitioner has to be perfect. They all have their challenges, but it's important that we practice what we preach. Because how do you truly understand the challenges of your patient if you're not also trying to do those things? Like, I can't tell my patient exercise 45 minutes a day if I'm not trying to exercise 45 minutes a day. I can't like help them implement it into their day. I can't give them that real experience. It's like MMA coaches, like the best guys to have in your corner are guys who have also been in that fight, because they understand deep level what you're going through mentally, psychologically. Like they're going to be the best people to rely on. So you want, when you're looking for a practitioner, one, you want somebody you like. Like some people work with us just because they like me or they like our brand. Some people don't work with us because they don't like me or the way that I speak or the way that I get my message across. And that's okay. Like find somebody that resonates with you.
Yeah.
My style is not one of like, I'm going to find ways to challenge you and to get you to do what you need to do because it's the best thing for you. It's a bit of tough love. Like I'm not going to coddle and baby my patients and treat them like children. You're an adult.
100%.
Yeah, like you're an adult. You have free will, and I'm not there with you 24 hours of the day to tell you what you should and shouldn't put in your mouth. That's up to you to decide.
Especially when you've gone through it yourself and you understand that process. It's like a little bit of that, like you said, that sugarcoating element of it is your patience for that is much less because you're like, the outcome, the process. It's like a cause and effect. So it's like, you don't really want to go with those loops with the patient. It's just like, this is what it is. This is what it is. Do you want to meet here or not? So a little bit of your patience and kind of, understanding for that kind of lack of commitment or urgency, which is something I found with myself, you can be a little bit impatient with that. Not necessarily in a bad way, but like you said, just kind of a little bit of tough love. And because a lot of people, they just go through kind of getting things sugar-coated, to preserve their feelings, and they're not kind of understanding things for what they really are and as they are. And a lot of the time, that's what allows them to kind of just skim, limp their way through things without actually kind of taking control and making a significant change.
Look, sometimes someone just has to tell you the truth, right? And I remember when I was younger, I was in this relationship that was not very good for me. Like it was a very toxic relationship, and I wanted to get out of it, and I couldn't figure out I just had a really difficult time ending it. And I remember speaking to someone who was older than me, and he was like, one of the guys from Jiu Jitsu, who was a lot older than me, and he was like, hey man, your future looks like this if you don't end this. And he just like laid out the pattern. He was like, you're going to get married, and then you're going to get a divorce, and then it's going to be this and this and this and this, and it's going to be a horrible existence. It's going to ruin your entire life. Like financially, emotionally, spiritually, you're going to have a very, very difficult time. And that kind of helped me see the reality of the situation. I'm like, that's actually what I've been looking for. I've been looking for somebody to tell me what to do. Because a lot of like psychology is like, oh no, we don't tell you what to do. We'll get you to get to the answer. That's great. But sometimes I just want somebody to fucking tell me and say, hey dude, you're messing up. These are the consequences. You need to do something about it. And that's the wake up call that a lot of people need. So when I talk to patients, I tell them the risk factors and I go, look, right now you're here. But if you continue on this journey, eventually you'll end up having to take a statins drug and a blood pressure medication. You're going to have sleep apnea, and that's going to affect X, Y, and Z. And you probably at around the age of 50 or 55 experience a cardiac event and you might die. That's what the future looks like if nothing changes. In fact, like if we were to work on probabilities, is it more probable that you'll be healthy and happy and live a long life, or more probable that you're going to die an early death from a chronic disease? What do you think based on your current situation? And the answer is overwhelmingly,
and when
I
you
just
lay
lay it out like that. I'm like, let's just work on probabilities. Let's just say like, so you're overweight, you're on blood pressure medication, you have sleep apnea, you don't take care of your health, you don't exercise, you drink, you smoke. What do you think is going to happen? Like, fuck, I don't have to tell you, you're an adult.
A lot of people are kind of like avoiding it too. That's why, like you said, it doesn't really always work to kind of help them get to that conclusion because they're not interested in paying attention to it. But when you lay it out for them like that, it's like, this is the outcome, probable, outcome. A lot of people, they work better with things data-wise, tangible, So when you put it like that, it's like, okay, are you okay with this outcome? Do you want this outcome? Yes or no? Okay, no, then this is what you need to do. Yes, then okay, don't change anything or keep doing what you're doing.
Look, and not everyone likes that, but I get like passionate and heated about it because it just frustrates me, and like that's how I work. I need somebody to tell me this is what's going to happen if you don't change X, Y, and Z. And then it opens my eyes to the possibilities. And then I go, okay, now I have a choice. That somebody's given me the choice.
And it's with their best
Yeah.
interest in mind.
Yeah.
It comes from a place of obviously caring and, wanting the best for that person. So that's why it can almost be a little bit frustrating,
Yeah.
right? When it's like they're not taking what's on the table for them, the opportunity that's available to get that good outcome, and they're just kind of settling and staying complacent with the potential.
And with us, like
one.
I've done more free appointments than I've done paid appointments. In order to work with us, like you actually end up doing an hour appointment with me for free to figure out whether we can actually help you. And so I give people coaching and advice and things to do on those appointments that they don't have to pay for. You might end up going to a specialist or a rheumatologist or a different practitioner that will charge you for that appointment and not really tell you very much. They'll hold information back.
Yeah.
They'll give you half answers. They'll be dismissive. They don't listen to you. And people, for some reason, like keep going back to these same specialists. It's like a toxic relationship. It's like you're looking for something different, but you know what to expect. And then you just keep going back for the same thing. So you just have to be ready for change, man. Like everybody has their own journey. And even though it might be frustrating for me, I don't understand what really they're going through because I'm not them. But everybody has to, in order to improve your health, you first have to want to change. And if you have that desire, if you have that reason, then we can do anything. But if you're not there yet, don't do testing. Don't buy supplements. Like don't waste your time and money on things that you're not going to implement anyway. It's not worth it. Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head with the toxic relationship. That's exactly what it is, right? Especially with doctors, because it's not as hands-on of approach where it's like you're getting a protocol, you're getting a supplement, you're getting whatever, and then you're kind of left to your own devices to just do it, figure it out, continue on, and then you come back in only a few months. So it's like a doctor seeing you every few months. It's like, a lot of people left to their own devices, they're just not going to follow through. And a lot of people, they to save face or, ego, whatever it is, they'll even lie. I've heard this from physical therapists as well. It's like 99% of people say like they did their exercises, but we know most of them aren't doing them and they're not seeing any progress. And that's why. So the doctor, you see them every few months, it's like you're left to your own devices. You're not going to commit to it. And now you're just going back, toxic relationship, wasting your money. Yeah. And it's kind of that repetitive cycle.
Yeah, and a lot of doctors go into medical practice with the best intentions, right? They want to help. But not all of them. Some of them are very arrogant. Some of them are very dismissive of their patient, and they're also dismissive of other therapies that might work. They feel threatened. Like I've had patients take out testing and take it to their gastroenterologist and go, look, I have this infection. And they're like, no, don't worry about that. You're like, what do you mean? Like, I have the data. I have it in front of me. I can see what it is. And they just dismiss it. And you wonder why. You go,
oh, that's just not
or like, oh, there's no research to say that dietary. I remember my mum had cancer and we were in an oncologist's office, and this oncologist was very dismissive. And we asked her, I said, hey, what if we change my mum's diet and also introduce some exercise? Will that improve the possible outcome? And she literally said, there is no evidence to show that exercise and diet will make a difference. I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what evidence do you want? Like, all these people out there who in the scientific community, in the nutrition world, who are like, there's no evidence. And you're like, bro, how about you just do it? Just go exercise more and eat better and you'll get better. And then isn't that evidence enough? Like, what do you have to see we know it works. We 100% know it works. There might not be a meta-analysis on the exact thing, but like, it works. The sky is blue.
Yeah.
All I have to do is look up. I don't need a randomized controlled trial and a systematic literature review and a meta-analysis to tell me that the sky is blue. I just look up and it's blue. And so people dismiss...
And people always want the isolated variable,
dismiss
right?
like anecdotal evidence, and people dismiss personal experience as evidence. And that's what doctors do. There's no evidence. What do you mean? Like, if your patient exercises and eats, what could possibly go wrong? Why wouldn't you want them exercising and eating better? Is their health going to get worse? No, it can only get better. So why are you not encouraging that? What are the
Yeah.
risk factors of doing more exercise? Almost nothing. Like, you can only improve. So why are doctors not encouraging that? It should be a prescription. It should literally be a prescription to exercise X amount of time. And by exercise, I mean, like, even going for a walk, you know, even doing something a little bit strenuous. Like, these things, we know that there's no negative outcome. So we should be encouraging it all of the time. It shouldn't be something that's...
It's funny because people who don't exercise will categorize like, oh, but walking's not exercise. Like, well, no, it is. It's the most accessible and one of the most important forms of exercise. Even if you're just going for a stroll, you know, if you walk with a little bit of a decent pace, that's even better, obviously.
100%.
But I'm not sure if you heard of what's been kind of gaining. I'm not sure if it's used in Australia as well, but Ozempic, semaglutide, has been. It's been, you're hearing about it everywhere now, and that's the perfect example of that, right? Because they're even talking about it for children. It's like, don't look at why the child is like that in the first place and what to change. Just sell them this pill that's supposedly the solution, because before, unless, it's statins or whatever it might be later down the line, especially for younger folks, there's not that, pharmaceutical intervention that they can sell you or prescribe you early on for something like obesity. Now they have that. So that's going to be the go-to.
Man,
obviously.
like, look, if you want to like get into the conspiracy of pharmaceuticals, like just look at the Sackler family. You know, these guys created Valium and then they created OxyContin and lied to the masses about how of its effects and its whatever. And then they created an epidemic of addiction and people are dying every single day in the US. But they're still operating and they're still in business. Like, sure, some people can benefit from it. But for children, it's wild.
Wow.
And so what they've done is they've gone, oh, wow, like we have this obesity epidemic that we've created by fucking selling people fast food and cereals and excessive calories and, and then now, how do we treat it? Well, now we have a drug for it. Like, forget the, dude, it really, really, really like grinds my gears and it gets me going because like, I just don't understand the world. I don't get it,
It's a sick business model, right? Because it's like when people distill the idea down, business is what problems and solutions. So it's like they got that monopoly. They got the problem. They can control the problem. They can create the problem. And then they also have the solution.
Yeah.
So they're not just, making money on the solution. They're making it both ways. Yeah. It's like a negative feedback loop. And something that's interesting.
They're also just there, supply and demand. The demand first has to be there for them to profit. So like the people who know better, like we know better, but we still want it. Like we know that there's no quick fix solution, but we still try it and we'll still do it and we'll still risk our health.
It's human
and so
condition.
It's like, it's at the end of the day, it's up to us as consumers to vote with what we pay for. Like we vote with that. Every time you make a purchase, you vote with your dollar. You're supporting something. So you've got to think like, do I want to get Ozempic? Like, is that what I want to support? What if my child ends up on it in the future because I'm contributing to the problem here because I'm actually using the drug?
Or do you want to support your local farmer?
Yeah, or do you just want to go for
who's raising regenerative?
Yeah, just change your diet a little bit. Just stop fucking eating like a child. If your child wakes up in the morning and they go, Mom, I want cake for breakfast. Or Dad, I want cake for breakfast. You wouldn't give them cake for breakfast. Like, they're a child. They don't know the consequences of eating cake for breakfast. So you go, no, we're going to have this first and then maybe later I'll give you a sweet. But then you have adults who behave like children, who know better and yet still eat cake for breakfast. And you're like, dude, like, I don't know how to explain it to you. Like, there's no just stop eating like a child. What do you mean you're 50 years old and you're eating Fruit Loops and Captain Crunch for breakfast? Like, what? Like,
because it's always harder to be self-aware, right? Like when the person, if you give them, like you just said, the example of their kid, it's kind of obvious. But when it comes to themselves, it starts to kind of slip away a little bit.
And like, it comes from childhood as well and the way that you're raised. Like, if you have a child who's very entitled and they have like what they call the emperor child, Mom, I want pizza for dinner. Sure. You have pizza.
Yes,
it's like, no, that's not how it works. A child needs to get used to being told no. It's like, no, we're going to eat this for dinner tonight. We're going to have fish and whatever. And that's it. That's what's for dinner. If you don't want to eat, don't eat. And what happens is the child learns that like the world doesn't bend towards them and they can't always get what they want. And so they learn how to control their desires. And then they grow into adults who also know how to control their desires. Otherwise, if you always get what you desire, it's not a very good life. If you're constantly running to your desires when it comes to either diet or whatever it is, whatever thing you want, it's like you have to learn to say no to yourself. I want another double espresso, but it's not good for me.
It's kind of like exactly what you were saying, the parents and the children. That kind of reminds me of, again, the Western kind of way, because like exactly on this topic, the prioritization of kind of happiness and the emotional feeling of feeling happy and kind of chasing that. That's again where parents have that ideology like, oh, well, I'm going to make the kid upset. They're trying to keep their kid as happy as possible. And that's what ends up, allowing them to have the Fruit Loops, allowing them to have what they want, because they're like, I don't want to upset the kid. Whereas, a little more traditional cultures, it's like, no, the kid has to learn, instill discipline. It's not always about feeling good and being happy, because, again, feeling good in that temporary moment in the long term is going to lead you to feel exactly the opposite.
Like heroin makes you feel amazing in a temporary moment.
If you're pursuing
would you give your child heroin?
How far are you going to go down that path?
Yeah, so it's like
Exactly.
I know we're like explaining it in a very crude way, but it's true. It's like, would you give heroin will make you really happy? Why don't you just take that then? And
then, the justification would be, oh, the Fruit Loops is not going to kill him. Well, it's like, heroin is not necessarily going to kill him
straight away
either. So that, that rationalization, it's the same. Yeah, they're both slow burning candles. Are you going to still engage in it though? To what extent? Because it's like you're making that decision knowing it's not good. That what percentage on the scale of it not being good doesn't really matter. You're going with something that's just bad.
Even like, dude, even God had things that he wanted you to not do. Adam and Eve, it was like, you can have everything you want in the Garden of Eden, but don't eat that apple. That's not God being not loving. He's not being mean to you. It's a form of love. And so when you're taking care of yourself or taking care of your children or whatever it is, like, it's a form of love to say, no, don't do that, to hold something back. If your child wants alcohol at the age of 13, it's your job to say no. And that's actually love. You can't always give them what they want. You can't always give yourself what you want, because that's not self-love. Like this idea of self-love, like, oh, yes, queen, like, eat whatever you want. Like, make yourself happy. That's not love, dude. Like, love is going, actually, what's best, what's good for me? What's good for my soul? What's good for my spirit? What's good for my health? Like, what's actually going to make me feel better about myself in the long term? And that's love. And sometimes that means saying no to yourself. No, like, I'm not going to go out and drink tonight. I'm not going to have 3 drinks with dinner. I'm not going to have casual sex or eat McDonald's. Like, that's not love. Just because you want it doesn't mean it's good for you.
That's kind of the tricky thing with the human condition, right? Your want is always going to, or likely often going to be not what you should do. And when you look at, successful people, great people in whatever area, field in life, none of them have had necessarily easy lives, but they like the outcome. But if you had to face every decision along that path, you're going to have trouble, making a lot of those decisions, going with the hard one. So it's like you have to condition yourself, but also a little bit of it is kind of just being forced into it, because you'll like the outcome, but you're not going to know that until you get there.
Yeah. I remember like my Jiu Jitsu coach used to say to me, be careful what you ask for, because you just might get it. It comes with responsibilities. And I remember putting a video out on this on my YouTube channel. It was like responsibility, accountability, and liability. Those are like the 3 things. No matter what you want, you have to take on some level of responsibility. If you don't want that, don't even start. You have to be accountable to someone or to yourself. And you have to have liability. There's got to be some skin in the game and some risk. And if you're not ready to adopt any of those things, then don't start. Like, don't just stay where you are. Don't change.
I think just in the Patrick Bet-David book, the first step, he says the next 5 moves. The first move is figure out who you are and what do you actually want. Because a lot of people haven't identified that, so they're not moving forward with clarity. It's like you might not want the same thing as the next person. And
when you're thinking about, there's actually a really good modality called acceptance commitment therapy, ACT therapy, and I think most people should at least explore it, because gets you to define your core values and what's important to you. And sometimes what's important to you isn't what's important to the rest of the world. And if you're really honest with yourself, like forget what other people want you to want, you know? So say you had to pick between love and respect, right? And you could only have one. The world might tell you that, you know what, love is the thing to pick. But for you, maybe it's respect. And you have to be honest with yourself. Say you had to pick between wealth and purpose. Maybe the world says the better thing to pick, or the thing that's more righteous, is purpose. You should want to make a difference instead of being wealthy. But maybe for you, you just want to be wealthy. For me, I don't want fancy cars or watches, or none of that stuff interests me. What I want is complete freedom.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to feel vulnerable financially. Like, that's what drives me. What drives me is being able to take time off when I want to take time off. What drives me is being able to do things my way and being able to work with who I want to work with.
Yeah.
I want freedom of my life. I don't want anyone telling me what to do. That's maybe like a bit of a trauma response. I don't know, but like, that's what drives me. It's not the things that drive me. I just want freedom. I don't want you telling me what to do. I want to live my life how I want to live my life. So you have to figure out what's driving you. And that's ultimately what it is with people when they're health. Like, some people, some people just don't want to adopt the responsibility that maybe they've somehow created this condition for themselves. It's not entirely, sick people, like, it's not entirely your fault that you're unwell, or even me, like, it wasn't entirely my fault that I was unwell, but at some point I had a choice. At some point I could choose to do something about it. So we're all at some point in our lives given an opportunity to go, okay, which road am I going to take? There are exceptions. There are people who have obviously really unfortunate conditions, but even then they can do something with it. They can do something better. There's always a choice that we face. Always.
Yeah. While we're on that topic, kind of transitioning a little more into business side of things, I thought we'll talk about sales, because it kind of even applies to this conversation, because, they say selling is persuasion, whatever. In this regard, like you said, you don't necessarily want to have to persuade someone, but a lot of sales, like, from even personally, I've sold myself into things, you know what I mean? Just that mental switch and that going through that process with yourself, because a lot of things are impulses, and kind of being able to help yourself understand clearly, what does this situation look like? How should I move forward? And, maybe give yourself that push if it's necessary. So I guess the question would be, like, what do you think the importance of sales is, just for anyone, really, that understanding, that kind of psychology aspect?
And I'll use an example of myself, right? So back in like 2019 or 2020, I think it was, I bought an Oura ring, right? You know what Oura rings are? Yeah. Okay. So back then, I bought an Oura ring.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't buy the Oura ring to know exactly what my heart rate. I didn't really care about all of that much. I bought it because all of the people that I liked and looked up to and admired also had one. So I was like, oh, that dude's really successful and he has an Oura ring. And that girl's really successful and she has an Oura. I want to be part of the club. I want one too. Because I want to signal to everyone else that, I'm also like part of that. I didn't do that consciously at the time. I wasn't like consciously realizing that I was doing that. But upon looking back, like, getting the Oura ring was more about status rather than like me knowing my sleep data. And that's an emotional purchase, right? Sometimes you buy things because you want to signal something to the rest of the world. Sometimes you buy things because you want to feel like you're actually trying something. But sales is just as much emotional as it is logical. And sometimes you just have to know who you're speaking to. If you have a person on a sales call, you've got to know, is this a person driven by logic or is this a person driven by emotions? And which one, how am I going to tap into that to get them to do what's best for them? And sometimes what's best for them is not buying the thing that you're selling. So it's really important, I think, to operate with some integrity, because the sales is a powerful tool. Like, you can convince people to do a lot of things. Not always good though. Usually, like, salespeople are also the easiest to sell to because that's just how they're wired. But Sales is persuasion.
Yeah.
It's a process. I think it's just a lot of the time it's offering clarity, offering solutions. You should have somewhat of a process when you're selling, and knowing what to ask and when to ask it is really key. And understanding, like, a lot of my sales process is vetting the person. Like, I want to get intention as quickly as possible. So a lot of people will give you attention,
Yeah.
but their intention might not be there. So like, they'll get on a sales call with you, they'll like your content, you've got their attention, but what do they want? So like, the first question I ask on a sales call is, hey man, like, good to have you here. Like, what are you hoping to get out of today's call? Because if you're hoping,
Yeah. Oh, I just booked because
yeah,
your
cool.
content looked cool.
What about it is cool to you?
Oh, yeah, I just saw you guys were dealing with autoimmune issues, and
Okay.
I'm kind of dealing with one, so I wanted to learn some more.
And if we find a way to treat your autoimmune condition today, like if we figure out a solution for you, would you move forward with some form of treatment?
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Why maybe?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm trying to get, like, what do
Yeah.
you want? Like, because I'm trying to get the
Yeah.
intention there, because I'm here to give you a solution to help you get better. And if we find a solution, I want you to move forward with it. That's my intention. Like, I'm not, I don't just
You
get
don't
on
want to
an
waste
hour
your
call
time
just
or their
because.
time.
I mean, and then I would ask a question like, do you normally just book calls just to chat? Like, do you have the time to do that?
Yeah.
Because I know there's a reason why you're here. There's something that's causing
Yeah.
you pain, discomfort that you want resolved. I want to find out what that is and then offer you a solution. Honestly, like, let's just be honest with each other. So sales is like I think like a lot of the time salespeople make a mistake because they don't get the intention up front. And what happens is they spend 45 minutes to an hour talking to somebody.
Yeah.
And at the end, they're like, oh no, I just wanted to see what you're about. Like, you should know that in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then if the intention is there, and the honesty and the communication is there, it's kind of going through, helping them get through their limiting beliefs, in the kind of honest, very direct approach. You're kind of just, the only persuasion that's occurring is helping them pass any limiting beliefs they have to kind of get to the decision.
Eventually you get to a point where really it's just answering questions for them. They have doubts, they have questions, they're unsure, and you just have to provide clarity. And if they're a reasonable person and what you offer is reasonable, there should be no reason why it doesn't work. Sometimes what happens is you're speaking to somebody who wants a $10,000 problem fixed for $200, which is completely unreasonable. And then sometimes you're offering them something at a ridiculously unreasonable price, which they can get for way cheaper. So I think with a lot of sales as well, like, it has to make sense. The offer and the person you speak, it has to align.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, there's a lot of offers out there, and I know of a lot of health programs that are selling things for ridiculously high prices that make no sense. You're like, what do you mean it's $9,000 to have 5 30-minute appointments and 2 rounds of supplements? Like, I just don't understand how that computes. It's not that I don't want to do it. It's not that I don't want to get better. And then a lot of sales tactics are like very manipulative, so like, oh, well, do you want to get better? It's like, yeah, of course I want to get better. That's why I'm on this call, but I'm not dumb. And that doesn't make sense to me. So help it make sense to me.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of salespeople get frustrated because they're selling an offer that sucks. It doesn't align with your market. It doesn't make sense. People are not buying from you because your offer is unreasonable. People aren't dumb.
Things are not in alignment, then that's, as that salesperson as well, it's just trying to force something into the wrong mold, and the mold might even be broken in the sense of the offer.
And you might get the sale, but then what?
Be taking advantage too.
Then they're a bad client, then they leave bad reviews, and they want refunds. Then that's not the goal of a business. Like, the goal for us at Humanly isn't to get as many sales as possible. It's to change as many lives as possible. So if I feel like somebody at the beginning of the call is just not going to change, I don't want them in the program. I don't want them because I know it's just going to be more of a headache.
You can just go find that person.
Exactly. So as a business, you got to think like, what is the metric that I'm trying to achieve? If the metric is get as many sales as possible, then go for it. Just understand that you might not always get the best result. If the metric that you're trying to track is, I want as many success stories this year as possible, it's a completely different mindset to how you approach your sales calls. And like as a clinician, as a health practitioner, a lot of what you do in your appointments, even after you've sold your patient or your client, is also sales. It's persuasion. I'm trying to sell you the idea of changing your diet. I'm trying to sell you the idea of taking this supplement. I'm trying to persuade you to change the way that you think. So learning how to communicate with people is really, really important.
Yeah. 100%. I kind of want to circle back to maybe like the earlier stages of the business, kind of your process when you first started and kind of got the ball rolling, because in a lot of businesses, that kind of initial phase, getting that momentum is where things are all up in the air. And that's kind of where a lot of the interesting things happen. So one is kind of, what was that process like when you first started the business, putting pieces together in Montreal? And then also, like, did you have any mentors or help along the way? And, how did you kind of go about finding and choosing those people?
So the mentors part I've paid for a lot of courses and a lot of mentoring throughout the years. Some of it was very good and some of it was not so good. But even in the not so good mentorships, I learned what I don't want and what I don't want to do with my business. These days, I only will ever kind of get a mentor or a coach or if I want something really specific fixed, like I want a specific funnel built or I want a specific thing done, that's where I'll look for help, but a lot less mentoring these days. But I started the business, like it was never perfect. I didn't have a perfect offer. The offer continues to change and improve every year. Like everything's always changing, but it really started with me posting on Facebook and Instagram. And the main way I used to get clients was to go into Facebook groups. So like autoimmune groups or Hashimoto's groups and just post really valuable content. And over time, like after a month or two, I became kind of like an authority in that group because everyone's like, oh yeah, it's a weekly post on diet or whatever it was. And then from there, people would add me as a friend and I would talk to them, get them on a call, and that's how it went. So it was a lot of like manual organic work that I was doing. And then eventually now we run paid advertising, like it's ads, webinar, people apply for treatment with us and that's how they end up finding us. So that's kind of how I built it, man. It was just a lot of just providing value and talking to people. Sales happen in conversations. So if you're not having conversations, you're not going to get any sales. So you have to have I used to track this thing. I used to be like, I want to start 10 conversations a day. I want to book 3 sales calls. And then of that, I might get 1. So I had metrics that I would try to hit every day. So that was how I did it for a long, long time. And it's a good way to start a business because it's profitable. You're not spending money on advertising. You're learning a really good skill of how to talk to people and how to convert people and how to book people. You're learning very important sales skills. And then when you're ready to do paid advertising and to scale it, you already have that structure and that framework and those skills there. So that's how I built it at the beginning.
Right on. Yeah, it's like that's one of the good things about business is that it kind of forces you to develop yourself, right? Like a lot of people say your business is almost a reflection of you. You have to wear many different hats and work on a lot of different skills, which forces you to improve. So it kind of translates to your own life and your lifestyle as well. What would you say kind of experience-wise, how do you feel, running a business has benefited you in the sense of being able to wear so many different hats, the skills you've acquired along the way, as a business owner, your sales, marketing, copywriting, content creation, video editing, all these things that, each one of those is a whole profession in and of itself.
Look, I think the coolest thing from running a business is, especially a business like this, having the opportunity to talk to thousands of people. Throughout the 5 years, I think we've had way over maybe 2,000 calls booked in the calendar. And so I'm talking to people from Kentucky and Sydney and Melbourne and New Zealand and Canada, and they all have unique stories and unique backgrounds and different problems to fix. And so the biggest thing that I've learned, I know this is not a concrete answer in terms of skills, but the biggest thing that I've learned from business is empathy. Realizing that, man, people have really difficult lives. Not everybody is as fortunate as me or as you. Even though, we've come from, countries that aren't super developed and so, but we had love and we had good parents, and we've had our health, and we're very, very fortunate. And some people don't have that. So it's actually taught me like a lot of empathy. I would say that's like the most important thing, because I try to understand people. Like, I remember reading a quote saying, try to understand before you are understood. It's like, before you want them to understand you, try to understand them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just hear them out and like see what people are experiencing. So that's taught me a lot. And I think all the tactical stuff like video editing and copywriting and so on, so like that's easy. And it's something that you can easily outsource, and something that you can easily like do with ChatGPT these days. The important part is to understand like why you're doing it, and what is the message that you want to get across, and what's the tone in which you want to communicate your message. Like that stuff is important. The tactical stuff's easy to do. So like, you know, ideas on how to go viral, or what videos to make, or how to create reels, or how to build an email list. That's all information that you can find anywhere. But if you don't have something meaningful to say, none of that matters.
Yeah, that's one thing I think, especially with scaling business and, you know, growing a successful business, that I've personally seen and encountered with certain people, is that when it gets to a certain scale, people can kind of start to lose the humility and start to, you know, see people, clients, potential clients, prospects as numbers more so than, you know, an actual human. It's like, it's just another sales call. It's just another potential client. It's just another number, as opposed to, you know, a whole human who has a unique situation, etc. And that really applies to not just the health space, but any field. And yeah, those are the people where that kind of authenticity, that empathy is lacking. And a lot of people are smart enough to pick up on that. And, you know, even if it's kind of a gut instinct, or they just don't vibe with the energy, that's kind of what they're noticing. So that's something that is one has to be
just
careful
treating
of,
people like going into each appointment and into each call with a fresh perspective and an open mind and an open heart for these people, because they have an issue that they want to help with. And I had to learn that. Like, again, I've come full circle. Like, it started like that, and then there was a point where it got all about the numbers, and now it's like full circle again, where I'm like, actually, these are people that need help. It's been a super interesting journey.
So I'm thinking we could kind of transition to male lifestyles. We kind of get towards the end here and wrap things up. I've heard you say, in your opinion, you can kind of really only be at the top of your game in a few areas in life. So maybe elaborate a little bit on that. Obviously, what are those areas for you personally? And what do you think the importance in kind of narrowing down and just picking a few areas to
like, I
focus
think
on
we all have limited time, limited energy, and limited attention span. So you can't do everything well. You have to pick like a few things that you want to be exceptional at. You know, so when I was doing jiu-jitsu and that's all I was doing, like that was my primary focus. And then I had other things that were like a secondary focus. And now that I'm running my business, like that's my primary focus. And then jiu-jitsu is secondary. So I'm not going to be a world-class exceptional jiu-jitsu competitor at the same time that I'm building an exceptional business. One of them has to give. So I think like you have to decide. For me, like my goal is to be an exceptional business person. I want to build something really meaningful and impactful, and keep operating for another, you know, however long. I want to be healthy. Like I want to be somebody that actually looks healthy, feels healthy, and that's a whole thing on its own. Like that's a job. Like you have to really make effort to do that. And then I want to be a really good husband and a really good dad. Like those are the three things that I think I want to be exceptional at. Everything else is like, you know, I might be a decent guitar player, but I'm not going to be exceptional at it. I might like get to like a 1200 ELO in chess, but I'm not going to be a grandmaster anytime soon. So you can't have everything. You've got to pick. You've got to everything. Life is a game of trade-offs, you know. And I remember like I learned that from Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell is an amazing economist, like really good author and very just logical person. And he said everything is a trade-off. You're trading one thing for another. So I think you have to pick what it is that you want to be good at, and then you have to trade something for that. You know, if you want to be a world champion and a UFC fighter and whatever, you also might not be the most present dad, because a lot of the attention goes towards fighting, and that's a trade-off that you have to make. There are people who do it, but majority of the time you've got to give something up for it.
You can be good at anything,
You can be
but you
good at
can't be good
anything,
at
but you can't be
everything,
great at
right?
everything.
Kind of, obviously,
Yeah.
you're familiar with Andrew Tate, and he's kind of become super popular influencer,
Yeah.
especially amongst men and young men. He's kind of put forth this idea of prioritizing your fitness, doing your work, being disciplined, all these kinds of things, which has obviously been
Yeah.
beneficial for a lot of men. But if we were to just kind of, like we just said, narrow it down to 2 or 3 areas for men to focus on to kind of live the best life possible, not necessarily in a hedonistic way, but in a, well-rounded, meaningful way. In your opinion, what would those
I
best
would
3 areas
say
be?
definitely physical fitness. Feeling good physically is really important, especially for men, because you can carry yourself in a different way. So I think physical fitness is a huge, even if you're like a guy and you're not the best looking, or you're not the tallest, or you're not, whatever it is that you think is not so good about you, if you're physically fit, it automatically puts you in a different category. Like, people take you a little bit more seriously. I would take you more seriously. If I walked into a room and there was a guy who's fit, dressed well, presents himself appropriately, can have a conversation with me, I instantly think this person's a lot more put together than somebody who's overweight, because, they're more disciplined. It takes effort to be fit. You can't buy it. It's constant work. So I think physical fitness is a big one. I think spirituality is huge. Like, whether you believe in God or not, I think realizing that there are a lot of good lessons that come from religion. One is like not being prideful, because not everything is because of you. Sometimes you're blessed with certain gifts. So I think spirituality is a big one. Religion is big. So physical fitness, spirituality, and I would say skill set. Like, learn a skill and be useful to society as a whole. Like, be a participant in society. Don't be a spectator. A lot of people are looking at the world from the outside and going and criticizing, this is bad, and the pharmaceutical industry is bad, and the world's fucked up, and blah, blah. Okay, cool. Like, that's great, but participate, make a change, do something about it. I remember saying, like, I don't know if you ever read The Man in the Arena by Theodore Roosevelt. I wonder if I can find it. But he basically says, like, it's the man in the arena who counts, not the critic. Yeah, like, the critic has never experienced the highs of the highs and the lows of the lows. He has no idea what it feels like. But the man, even if he fails in the pursuit of something. So even if he knows what it feels like. And so get involved and be useful to society. Like, participate in things. If there's an event to help people and be charitable, go and participate. If there's a way that you can help your business grow, or even if you have a 9-to-5 job and there's something that you can do that's extracurricular, like outside of your normal requirements, like, go and participate, do it. Like, be useful to society around you, because being useful makes you feel good even about yourself, but it makes you feel like, I actually have a purpose. I'm contributing towards something. So I think, like, physical fitness, spirituality, and skill set, like being useful and getting involved. A lot of men these days, even men like in their 30s, like, the incels, right? Like, they spend a lot of time on their own. They have like antisocial personality traits. They're in their room. They're playing video games. It's all about them. Everything is focused about, it's about them. How do I make myself feel good?
Yeah.
What do I want? What do I? It's like, men, start thinking about, how can I contribute to society? Like, what can I do for my community and my society? And at some point, you have to start thinking less about yourself. It's a journey that I've had. Like, in my 20s, like, everything was about me. I want to achieve. I want to be better. I want to be richer. I want to be fitter. I want to be whatever. And then eventually it gets to a point where, okay, it's not about me anymore. How can I contribute to community and society? What can I do for somebody else? So I think, like, those 3 things can make people feel, it's a phenomenal antidepressant. If you feel depressed and you feel worthless and whatever, like, start doing good things for people and look how it changes your outlook on life.
Yeah. In regards to the incel, it's like, just go for a walk, see someone less fortunate than you who's homeless, and that perspective should kind of snap you out of that kind of self-centered thinking pattern. So, but those are all
I think those 3 things are really key. And, like, for me, a big one recently has been religion, like understanding God and understanding mankind and our tendencies and how we're just sinners. Like, we're all very much the same. Yeah, that's been a big one for me, because no one gets to escape mankind. Like, we're all very much similar.
Kind of wrap things up here, kind of final question, we could say, what would you say has been the most impactful event or experience, but, one of adversity that, like we spoke about, maybe in the time didn't feel good, but in retrospect, it was beneficial for where you're at now? And then also, off the back of that, what is your opinion of being a man, being a good man? What does that mean to you?
Man. One experience. That's hard.
Losing a fight.
Yeah, for sure. Like losing a fight was a big one. Like losing it in the way that I lost as well, like being knocked out, and that was a big thing that really changed like the trajectory of my life and my attitudes towards just myself. But I think like a moment that I distinctly remember, and I was like really young, was leaving Macedonia. I remember like leaving to come to Australia, and we were outside at the front of the house, and all the neighbors were there, and my uncle was there, and he was like crying, and he picked me up, and like I didn't understand that at the time because I was a kid. I was like, oh, like we'll see each other again, but then we didn't, and my grandmother passed away, and people passed away, and I just never saw them again, and like that was it, and just like realizing that was a really big moment for me, because I realized I'm like, shit, that's like a death of my old life, and now I've got this new life that I have to live, but that's gone forever, like what I had before. So that really kind of taught me to not take things for granted, I think, and to like kind of always have that mindset of, and it's hard because it's a pursuit, like being grateful is a thing that you have to try to do. It doesn't just happen. But sometimes, what you have is exactly what you wished for at one point. You just have to remind yourself of that and realize that everything you have that you take for granted today, tomorrow could be gone, and things can change. So I think that's been a big thing for me, just realizing like I'm really grateful for what I have. What was the next question? What does it take to be a...
What is your opinion of being a good man,
so
being a man?
I'm going to look something up because I was trying to find the answer to this myself a few months ago. Instead of like taking my opinion for it, I'd rather listen to God. I think a lot of the questions that we have when it comes to these like more serious questions, the answers are already there. We just have to kind of look and listen. And in the Bible, it says, here we go, it's like the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighted in his way. So a good man does not allow himself to be led by circumstances, other people, or even his own feelings. He allows God to be in control of his life, and a good man helps others, and he's a giver. It also says that a good man is meek, like he has a gentle spirit, and he's a gentle leader, because that always wins. Like if you ever find somebody who's calm and gentle and offers you assurance, you kind of more gravitated towards them. But that's a good man does not allow himself to be led by circumstances, other people, or even his own feelings. So it's not your outside circumstances that make you. It's not other people that make you. You shouldn't be led by your own feelings, because your feelings can fool you and lead you in a bad direction. You should have something guiding you. And for a lot of people, that's God. And God gives you directions into what he literally tells you what will make a good life and what won't. And we can deny it. And maybe it's a bit old fashioned to say these days, but like you look throughout history and like everything that's in the Bible and in the Quran and that people follow, it makes for a better life. So I think what makes you a good man is exactly that. Don't be led by circumstances, other people, or your own feelings. Do what is the righteous thing to do.
Amazing answer, brother. Marko, it was great to have you on. This was a great conversation, and hopefully
thank you, bro. I hope I didn't rant too much. I can win on a couple of rants there, but it was good.
No
we'll talk
worries.
soon.